about the colony. So now we need to switch it to that. And I'll turn off the light.
And I want to warn you that the quality of the film and the recording, you can tell it's 25 years old. So there is going to be some background static. So we apologize for that. But
Now for our presentation on the Colony Association. There have been many people working on this project, and I'm told that this started 3 to 4 years ago. So lots of work has gone into this. Thanks to Caroline Knott, the head of our historical research committee. And let's see, Ken Birch, who is the photographer. Ken, wait. Also, obviously, to our presenters, Blanche Blumenfeld, who is up here, and we'll see lots from Blanche in a few minutes. And also from Bea Gritzen, who's going to start off our presentation. There are many other people to thank, and I'll actually ask you to acknowledge people as we go ahead, go through the presentation. Okay? Thanks very much. So, Bea, you come up here and we'll get the lights off.
Well, right. First off, I'll just give a brief introduction of the subject. It is timely that today we are looking back in history at the Colony Association, since it was just 75 years ago that this idealistic dream of a few New Yorkers was developing into a reality. Remembering the agrarian environment of their home countries, these Jewish immigrants longed to leave the city and its factory-like education being offered to their children. For a year, they had advertised their plan in the Yiddish newspaper, the Jewish Daily Forward. More than 70 interested people wanted to be a part of this socio-economic experiment. It was non-religious and non-profit. Rather, it was an idealistic concept which sought to build up human beings through research, education, and thinking, to quote one member, Florence Robbins Steya. They started a wide search for land, wrote a constitution complete with a preamble, and were incorporated under their name of the Chatham Colony Association in 1922. The people that they had enrolled had vastly different qualifications. Some were highly educated, others were young and unskilled. Some had families, some were about to marry, and others were single. There were artists, sculptors, farmers, 2 newspaper editors, a bookbinder, a printer, an eye doctor, a nurse, and so on. Some people had nest eggs and could afford to hire somebody to build their houses. Others lived in tents or crude structures while they undertook the house construction themselves. If they were lucky, they had family or friends who helped. Some people rented, others came out for the summers only, and others lived here year-round and were commuters. Most were Russian, a few Romanian, Polish, Lithuanian, or Italian. There was a Scotsman, a Persian, a Jamaican, and an American Indian. With such divergent backgrounds, these people came out to their tract of land in Chatham Township. Those early years of the colony were idyllic, even though they worked long, hard days. They cleared their land, laid trees like rows of corduroy for roads, manually dug out the mud around the spring on Spring Street to make a swimming pool, and cooperation was the name of the game. Just want to say thanks to Ken for the wonderful slides. Also, for the sake of time, perhaps if you have questions at the end of the meeting, please. I did leave a few pencils and index cards at the back table if any of you have information or memorabilia and would like us to contact you. In 1980, this panel reminisced about the early days of the Chatham Colony Association at a meeting of our society. Left to right, we have Florence Robbins Stea, Goldie Chipka, Esther Thorner Hirschfeld, who is Blanche's sister, and Jenny Switzen. Goldie Chipka laughed and said, the neighbors were fearful when they heard New Yorkers were moving. It was like moving there. It was like the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. The colonists were concerned too. As it turned out, though, their new neighbors were friendly and helpful. Jenny Switzen told of wearing this lovely white dress when she first came to see the acreage. She never expected such heavy vegetation and returned to the city later that day with it torn and ruined. Philemon Dickinson owned a large homestead farm here in Chatham Township in the 18th century. In his will, he divided the farm between his two sons, Caleb and Peter. This diagram shows a portion of Caleb's half. This straight line was the division line between their properties and became Lafayette Avenue. In 1922, it was still a dirt road. This is the association's 1922 map showing the tract divided into 103 lots. They cost $200, and a member could purchase a maximum of 3. Here again is Lafayette Avenue, and we have maple and floral and spring and School Avenue across here, and down here where Lafayette intersected with Southern Boulevard, we have the wasteland that was too wet for any lots. They didn't plan to build, and this in here was an exception. On your maps, you might have noticed that. Approximately 4 acres were deeded to Charlotte Amelia Dickinson in 1897 and were never part of the colony. The exception, as I call it, now belongs to the Friends Meeting of Summit, located on Southern Boulevard. This shows the Quaker sign and that of the congregation Beth Hatikva, which is currently meeting there. Fred Blumenfeld is the president. Charlotte Amelia Dickinson's house. The Friends have been renting it to tenants. Roger Knapp's grandparents lived here and had a farm years ago. This 3-story building was built on the west corner of Floral Street and Lafayette Avenue for Bernard Sommer, an idealist and probably one of 3 originators of the dream. He worked as a bookbinder for the Prue in Newark, where he learned about this tract of land. He opened a small private school, but in the Great Depression, it failed and he lost the house. It became known as the Big Mistake. The Sachs, also key founders, had 3 lots on Lafayette Avenue near Mr. Sommer. They lived in New York City over his 5th Avenue store. Louis was an optician and Fanny made designer sample dresses. Many paths crisscrossed the colony, and Sachs' path led to the pool. There were no fences nor locked doors in those days. The James Robbins house was built in the inner corner of 3 adjoining lots at the intersection of Floral and Lafayette. The 3rd key founder at 55 was an editor of the Jewish Daily Forward. the first president of the association, he later served several other terms. His wife Bertha was the treasurer and duly re-elected each year. She taught Russian in the 40s in the local adult school. Their son John became a director of off-Broadway theater groups and translated major Russian works, including Stanislavski's My Life in Art. Their daughter, Florence Robbins, married Cesar Stea in 32, and her parents had this studio house built for them on the western corner of Spring Street and Lafayette Avenue. He was a sculptor and painter, but during the Depression, they lost their house. They later moved to her parents' house on Floral Street. She wrote a family biography for the Fisherwack papers in 1967 for the Chatham Historical Society, available at the library. While there, see Cesar Stea's sculpture entitled Walt Whitman. After twice losing his house to fire, Burr Coffett had this brick house built on the east corner of Spring and Lafayette Avenue. An original member, an artist and sculptor, he placed a sculpted woman's torso overlooking a large sunken pool in his yard. A little later on, he replaced it with a self-sculpture of a man with a hoe. In 1931, he bought the adjoining Spring Street lot. When he died in 1972, his estate sold it to the township with two stipulations. The township would post a plaque saying Burr Coffett Memorial, and it would be used only for recreation, open space, and parkland. Burr Coffett left a self-facial image on the chimney and a small sculpture of a woman's face over the kitchen windows. She is believed to be his mother. The Condrats lived here on Spring Street with son Bill and two daughters, Iolita and Valeria. Val lives there today. When Bill graduated in 1933, he and Milton White traveled to Niagara Falls. They decided to swim across the river to Canada, below the falls, but before the bridge. White turned back, but Bill was a powerful swimmer. He became the first person to succeed. His name was placed on a plaque in the Daredevil Hall of Fame in Niagara Falls, and he appeared in the show for a week. When he returned to Chatham, there were two starry-eyed little boys on hand to welcome their hero, Berta Bazia and Katie Katz. William Weisgerber and William Condrat drew their lot numbers in 1929 from the same surveyor's cap. Condrat was puzzled but happy to comply with Weisgerber's request to swap the lots. He gave Weisgerber this smaller triangular lot next to the power lines on Spring Street. Perhaps Weisgerber wanted it for grazing land for the pony he bought later on. The Weisgerbers did not join the association. Recently sold, this house has been expanded and given a whole new look. The Scheid family rented this house on Lafayette Avenue at the eastern end of the colony. An active original member, he was president a number of times. They bought in the 40s. Mr. Scheid founded the QQ Motion Picture Titles Company when he invented the way to print black titles on a white background, or the reverse, for silent films. It was very successful. Thereafter, he was generous with $100 or $200 ready when a fellow columnist had need. Sadly, they lost a son, Mo, at a young age due to the then prevalent mastoiditis. Penicillin had not been discovered yet. This is the Eisenster's house on School Avenue, where they raised their 9 children. Employed as a printer for the crew, he may have been the one who told Bernard Sommer about the township tract of land. The Eisensters raised a few chickens and sold fresh eggs to the community. Isaac regularly donated blood to the Red Cross and was a volunteer fireman.
Excuse me, did you say that was Isaac Eisenstein?
Yes.
Thank you.
The Abasias lived here on Lafayette Avenue. Frida was Bernard Sommer's sister. Oreste had emigrated from Italy and worked as an electrician and general handyman. Later, he became a Dugan's bread man with a horse and wagon. Frida opened a small general store in the front room of her house in the Depression. She kept a goat because of her son's allergies, but that was nothing unusual. It was a farming area after all. The house was recently renovated and a second floor was added. Bernard Sommer's blind daughter, Surir Sommer, spent most of her time with her aunt and at the Abasi's house. So when the high school was constructed, they had this house moved across Lafayette Avenue to the hot lot next door to theirs and expanded it for Sue. She is now 86, living in a nursing home in Boobin, but as Bert says, she is still as sharp as a tack. Miss Belcher, a teacher who taught here in this building and in the Southern Boulevard School, attended both of his parents' wakes. Abraham Rubenchik had 2 lots on Floral Street. Clara, his wife, had a son from her first marriage named Louis Cohen, who lived with them. Attempting to jump on a train at Chatham Station, Louis missed his footing and caught his leg. The tourniquet was improperly administered, and his leg had to be amputated. However, this courageous young man pursued his studies and became an osteopathic doctor. Later, he built a house on his parents' second lot. His parents were active members who served as officers. This is the Rubenchik house as it looks today. Just a reminder that each passing day, the visible, tangible evidence that the colony existed is fast disappearing. The Pomerantz family lived here on Maple Street and were original members. In the early 30s, the Reuters rented the house before moving to Bernard Sommer's 3-story building. Mr. Reuter, a builder, converted the former school building to a 4-family house. He was a late member of the association, but a strong one. The Mollett family lived in this attractive house on Spring Street. Both Mr. and Mrs. Mollett worked in real estate. Her mother lived with them and raised the children. They were one of the more affluent families. Next door to the Robbins corner lot on Lafayette Avenue, Max Rotter had 2 lots. One he made into an apple orchard and had a well drilled to provide plenty of water for it. He shared his well with the neighbors on the other side, the Katz family, when their well did not come in. When Max Rotter died, the Shiplers bought this house and had it remodeled extensively. They had long been renters on Spring Street. On School Avenue, this was the Weiss house. The Katz family lived with them for 6 months while their house on Lafayette Avenue was being built. Max Weiss and Solomon Shipler had immigrated to the U.S. with Mr. Alphys, another colonist. He was a builder and taught Weiss and Shipler carpentry. They, like the other immigrants, passed through Ellis Island. The Greenbergs, who lived here on School Avenue, were not original members. They had a daughter, Evelyn, who was a lovely redhead. She was sent to school in New York City by the township because her choice of courses in fashion design and pattern making were not offered in the area. Lorenzo Passato emigrated from Italy when he was 15 years old. He met Aresta Abazia on the boat, and they remained friends. He joined the U.S. Army in 1915 and gained his citizenship. He bought this lot on the north corner of Lafayette Avenue and Southern Boulevard. His house has been improved with several additions. He was a big, strapping fellow, and he helped the colonists dig their pool and do other strenuous jobs. He had a taxi service, and every weekday honked the taxi horn in front of the Knight's house on Lafayette Avenue, and Anna would run out with boxes of flowers for sale in New York City. They later married and lived in the Knight house. This is the community house on School Avenue, which was intended to be developed into their modern, progressive school. Although that did not materialize, they had a summer program for the children and special entertainment and lectures for the adults. The building was then only 2/3 the size with a platform that stretched across the front. People came from all neighboring towns for their programs and paid a small admission. This area was the hub of life in the colony. Inside the house was a ping pong table, a player piano that played only one song, Dardanella, and lots of chairs around the edge. On the wall, someone had hung a hammer and sickle in support of the overthrow of the Tsar. Later, the colonists honored an original member, Morris Langer, as a martyr by hanging his picture in the community house as he looked in death. A furrier, he was said to be in dispute with the Lipsky gang over protection money. Someone had placed a bomb in his car so strong it blew a hole in the garage roof.
He was killed.
Yes. These early pictures of the pool were shared by Bea Spillman. Her parents were early active members, and she held office herself several times. Bea is a neurocognitive psychologist now. In the early days, the pool was stocked with fish. However, in the early 30s, there was the polio epidemic, and chlorine had to be added to the water. Later, they were required to hire a lifeguard. So, they hired Mr. Best from School Avenue, probably the only non-swimmer in the association. Across the street was a ball field and tennis courts. They all enjoyed the large bonfires they would have frequently. Hyman Rubin's house on Southern Boulevard. He had the dubious pleasure of becoming the president of the association in May of 1926 for a one-year term. It was probably in this period that the news of the arrival of the public service high tension lines became known. Some people in the colony felt he had sold them out to public service, but the rule of eminent domain governed. Only 6 years after their map had been surveyed and plotted into lots, the association had to have it surveyed again. This revised map shows the 225-foot wide swath cut by public service. One deed covering 20 lots shows they paid $58,000 to the colony, $58,000. About 40 lots were affected, some only slightly, a few obliterated. Some people dealt directly with public service, and some profited more than others. Others used the chance to move on. Mildred Eisenschur Carnswet noted that from then on, the harmonious quality of the colony was not as strong. This 1970s map of the township shows the path of the high tension lines and clears the doubt that it was easily moved to the left or to the right. The question that remains is whether information regarding the proposed public service right-of-way was available to the public well before the purchase. Did the previous owner know about the lines? Were the colonists just simply naive? This picture of B. Philwin was taken at the frozen colony pool. Aside from that, B. recalled that each week the Noes would kill a cow and sell some of the meat to the neighbors. She would walk with her mother to the Noe farm and play with Bailey Brower while her mother made her purchase. All the children skated at Kelly's Pond. She can recall looking up the embankment and seeing Mr. Churchill's silhouette as he looked down at the fun from time to time. Gabe Katz, her brother, is pictured here in their front yard with the Nauman house across Lafayette Avenue. Gabe is an artist and for professional reasons changed his last name to Cardin. He has wonderful memories of growing up here with a great swamp for a playground. The best time was the time when the renters were here in the summer. This pumping station, built over an artesian well, filled the pool and was the source of their own water system installed in 1926. Mr. Beauclerk was their official water meter reader. In 1936, they sold it to Commonwealth Water Company for $6,000. The children permitted to attend the association meetings recalled some heated discussions as to how to use the money. In the end, they divided it in three ways: $2,000 to expand the community house, $2,000 to improve the pool, and $2,000 to pave Maple Street and Floral Streets beyond School Avenue. The early 30s were very difficult for the colonists. Their spirits must already have been at a low because of the Depression and the car bombing in 1933, when the coldest month ever recorded here arrived in February of 1934. On the 28th, it was 23 degrees below zero. On the 9th, it was 26 degrees below zero. One man, whose house was to be auctioned off for lack of payment of taxes, walked that night in the snow to the small municipal building on Southern Boulevard in the bitter weather. Only the officials and 3 residents showed up. The homeowners each had the same purpose, to plead with the new owners to let his family stay till warmer weather arrived. Unfortunately, or fortunately, nobody else showed up. That was David Bernstein's house. And he built this house on Maple Street in the late 30s for his charming bride. Her brother was Michael Best, and he had moved to the Weiss House on School Street. This is a view from Southern Boulevard looking east. If you look closely up here, there's a house. This triangular lot belonged to Mr. Waxman, who was extremely fond of frogs' legs. Bert Basia recalls that he would offer $1 to him to catch a dozen frogs. No problem at all, since he and his buddies spent lots of time in the swamp doing just that. Here we have the boys at the pool. Another of B. Philwin's pictures. From left to right, Gabe Katz, Billy Weiss Gerber, who later worked on Wall Street, Herman Naumann, and Bert Abasia. Bert was a state champion athlete for soccer, baseball, and basketball. The association tried to have other people in the area join, if only as social members, but very few did. This is some of them at the pool. Vida and George Pugley lived on Maple Street. He commuted to the city where he played the cello for the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Their daughter also played the cello, and son George excelled at the piano. In 1936, Ida opened the Samovar Russian Tea Room. Ruth Churchill recalled attending a couple of musicals there given by the Chatham Women's Club. It had to close in 1942 due to the rationing of sugar and gasoline in World War II. They had several signs posted in the township and borough. Bob and Claire Muth bought the Pugley house in 1945, just after World War II. Having grown up in the borough, she had a large network of family and friends, so they did not join the association. Here we see the porch the Pugleys had added for the tea room as it appeared when the Muths moved in. The Muths closed in the porch windows to make it into a den. They always had a large garden and had beautiful flowers along the stretch of sidewalk beneath the power lines. Always makes a walk in the colony so pleasant on a summer day. The Stuckelman house was located on Maple Street. In 1942, their son Charlie died in the Navy during World War II. It was the first casualty in the township. His mother died a short time later, and some believed it was from a broken heart. The original builders on this lot, the Frankels, set their small house well back from Floral Street. They sold it to Stanley Rosen about 1945. His son, often at the colony, was a TV producer and had changed his name for professional reasons to Shelley Reynolds. He produced the Faye Emerson talk show, the series Foreign Intrigue, and later the movie of that name. DeMarzo built this house in the same setback location about 1990. This house on Maple Street was once rented by the Brindles. Mr. Brindle drove his truck around the community probably twice a week, offering fresh vegetables for sale. He met his demise while at work driving a Caterpillar tractor, which rolled over on him. Many years later, in 1945, our own Amelia and Adair Blackford bought this house from the Ackmans. They too have made some additions to their house. Amelia had a surprising visit a few years ago from the granddaughter of former colonists, the Jaffees. She was a college professor now in Michigan. Another time, it was Fanny Sack's grandniece at Amelia's door. When the Long Hill Fire Department planned to expand, the association donated the land on Southern Boulevard. Earlier, they had contributed some of their land in the swamp to the Boy Scouts for a firing range. This plaque on the front of the three-bay building states that the Chatham Colony Association donated the land and the residents contributed the money. It was dedicated in 1957. In 1969, a release was signed to dissolve the association. 8 acres of land and the pool were sold to the township for $100,000. After paying the lawyer's fees, the money was divided between the 35 remaining members. The colonists would be happy to see their farmer land being used for the recreation and good of the townspeople, and to know the townspeople had turned an eyesore into a beautiful park. And now Blanche Thorner Blumenfeld will recall some of her experiences while growing up in the colony.
Actually, after that presentation, I feel that Bea really knows the colony members almost better than I do. She almost seems to know them as if they were her members, and Carolyn also worked with me, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about them, and they both felt that it would be a good idea if you met one of the members themselves. And since I seem to be about the only one here that was willing and able to do this, I really agree that you probably would like to know the experiences, or who were these people that came to Chatham Colony, to Chatham Township, and bought this tract of land, and what drove them to do this. I mean, here was a piece of land, a black oak forest, no trees, I mean, plenty of trees, but no water, no streets, no electricity. It was just like going camping in the middle of the woods. And why would a group of people who had a perfectly good home in the city want to come out here as pioneers and build a community? But I guess they did have the pioneer spirit, and they looked at different sites in other parts of the state and finally decided that this was the place that they really wanted to be pioneers and carve out a community, which they did very well, I might add. And so I will just briefly tell you who these people were from my experience as one family. My father, Louis Thorner, was born in Lipno, Poland, December 31st, 1892. He came to the United States through Ellis Island at the age of 20. He was an orphan when he came here because he was the oldest of 5 children. His father died when he was only 9 years old, and he was the oldest child. And my father remembers that on his deathbed, he might have been dying from pneumonia. His family was all around, and it was decided which relative would raise which child, because the mother wanted to go back to live with her family. So he really learned how to be self-sufficient at a very early age. My mother, on the other hand, Clara Morrison, was born in 1897 in Minsk, Belarus. she decided that she wanted to be with her friends who were coming to the United States. She was born from a completely different environment. They had a home that was next to the school, and relatives would send their children to live with her and her grandmother so that they could go to school, which was next door. They had a huge samovar in their house, and everyone who came by from the community who wanted to have a hot cup of tea could stop by and have a hot cup of tea. They had servants to take care of things for her, and the grandmother was always there in the morning making hot chocolate with a thick coating on the top to give to the children in the morning, and they slept in these big beds made from goose down. And the mother had a business where she sold goose down, the down from geese. Every child was set up in business, and she really was well taken care of, yet she left that environment because all of her friends were coming to the United States. She lived with a brother, and she went to school right away, as did my father. He also immediately went to school. And then she decided that she really wanted to live by herself, have her own apartment with a friend, and she did that, and became an operator of ladies' fine lingerie. And so she was living quite nicely in New York, and I don't think she realized what she was getting into when my father said, no, we're going to live here. My father, on the other hand, since he really had to take care of himself quite well, he learned how to become a men's tailor in in Europe. And then later when he came here, he was a man's tailor of fine suits and coats, but he decided that he wants to become a ladies' tailor. So he went back to school, he got his high school diploma, and learned pattern making, and became a sample maker for some of the designers in New York. He worked for, one of the designers he worked for was Hannah Troy, and he would do the sample clothing for them and other designers. Later on, he moved to California, where he had his own store, which was a tailor store and a cleaning store, and then came back to the United States, back to New York, and decided that he wanted to live in the country. Because you have to remember that when you were Jewish growing up in Poland, you could not own property. And he always wanted to own his own land. And so this was a perfect time when he could move to the country and own his own land. So he was one of the original members who came here. And on the deed that I was looking at yesterday, it said that he bought 2 acres. They were 10 and 11 for $100. So it was $50 an acre. And little does he know that now on the corner of Floral and School Avenue, 1 acre with that small house was sold for $500,000. That 1 acre, which they have subdivided, removed the house, and they're building 2 houses there. So that was very, very interesting. A marriage broker arranged the marriage between my mother and father. My father was, down his age here, 29, and my mother was 23 years old. And he already owned property here. He said when he moved here, he came to the Lackawanna station downtown, and somehow, I imagine there must have been some taxi service or somehow, drove him to the corner of Lafayette and Maple, and that's where all of his belongings were deposited. There was no street there then, but that was where Maple Street was going to be. He found his way to his plots, put up a tent, and that's where he lived. He told me he had to dynamite 400 trees in order to clear the land, and began constructing a farm, because on every deed it said the purpose of this colony is for farming. And there was also something that said houses must be constructed 50 feet back from the road, and you had to adhere to the police regulations as well as be careful of your health code, the health code. So those are the 3 things they had to remember. And they had the charter from the state also, and they had the right to charge taxes. They charged $30 a year was the amount they could charge for taxes up until 1936, and then it had to be reduced to $20 if they needed the money. But they didn't, as I recall, they rarely charged taxes because nobody wanted to pay it. There's some very interesting things. There He provided water for anyone who wanted it. He had a wonderful well, and he provided the water. And Mrs. Strauss would always come over to our house and discuss things with my mother in German. And I could understand everything they said, but they never wanted me to talk German because they said, you live in the United States now, you're to talk English, and when you go to school, you must talk English, and we don't want you talking any foreign language in the house. Although I did understand Yiddish, and I could understand the German, but I was not supposed to speak it at home because we didn't live in Europe. One of the other things that I remember as a child was that we did have, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be looking at this, and here I'm telling you stories. This was part of the original house, and this, you have any lights to it. This was like the porch. This was a porch in the beginning, and it was open. It was later closed, and below that was the root cellar, where we kept all of the root vegetables and the apples from our farm. Because, and you see all the flowers, that my mother loved flowers and cannas, and we actually, our family actually did abide by our constitution, and we did have a working farm. And the entire acre was under cultivation, and this is a picture of my mother and father when they were quite young and soon after they married, and she was wearing designer dress. For this rural area, she really had some nice clothing to wear. And here she is again, very young, you can see, innocently brought to this wilderness. And you can see the ladder, and these were the front steps because later on we added another part to the house because my mother didn't want to go down to the cellar through the outside in the winter. She's still not doing that anymore. And so I thought I built another little addition to that. And I'll just tell you that some of these pictures and some of the, this was a very early picture, and you can see that that's a picture of myself and the kerosene container there because we had a wood stove in the kitchen for warmth and cooking, and also a kerosene stove that we put on a little oven on the top. My mother did all of her own baking. She would bake every Friday. She'd make challah, and we would have all of the baked goods for the week. And this is a picture that's one of my favorites because in the summertime, the women would hire counselors to come to the colony from New York, and they had a camp program for us. And this is the end of the season, and some of the things that the children made were displayed on the table. And I know this is, yeah, I know where that is here.
Here, you know.
I'll figure it out. Oh, okay, fine. Okay. That's myself, and that's my sister. I don't know who, this is the Huckley girl. This is Sally Hurwitz. Let's see, I think this is Shive's daughter, and this may be Beatrice Katz, maybe her. But we really had a wonderful time in the summer because we were always doing such exciting things, and we'd take walks in the Great Swamp on the, they had a boardwalk there then, and down at the pool, and they had so many different activities for us, and I didn't realize, growing up, and they had this camp going on for quite some time, that we were having such a really unique experience. The adults would have someone come in from New York to teach them how to play different instruments. And I know my mother played the mandolin, and they had like a little orchestra or band. So, and they had different functions going on all the time, and you really just felt you were part of this whole community. You knew all the neighbors, you could go into anyone's home, and it just was like the whole community raising all the children, and it was a wonderful feeling. This is another picture of the same group sitting there. This is a picture of our farm. We had, as I said, our entire property was under cultivation, and we all worked on the farm. And if we, there was one time I remember I wanted a bike or a typewriter, and my father says, well, if you want one, go sell the vegetables to the neighbors, and then you can make enough money to, and that's exactly what I did. And then I bought my bike, and I bought my typewriter. And this gentleman over here is Mr. Schwartz. He lived on the corner of Maple and School Avenue, and this is his granddaughter, and he was a very good friend of my father's. They both worked in New York, they're both sample makers in the dress industry, and he's just giving him some of the vegetables to take home to his family. This picture was taken in the Southern Boulevard School. It's myself. Where's, is that you? That's something. Seymour Antman, who lived in the Blackford house, on the Blackford house. Doris Ha, Weissner, other children too, and it was a combined 4th and 5th grade at the Southern Boulevard School, so there were 4th and 5th graders here. And this is my mother. You can see she's picking, we had loads of gooseberries and currants, and we turned them into jam and jellies and everything. And in the background, here are our apple trees. We had so many apples, and we would just store them. If someone wants to buy them, we would sell it to them. But we would give lots of them away and just pick them and store them in the basement for the winter, make applesauce, apple pies, apple butter, and really worked on our farm. My father over here is sharpening one of his hoes in the back. This is our path here. This is the path that came from the house going to the back to where the chickens were. And this over here is this tall pole that brought electricity we brought electricity to the chicken coop as well as water. And he really did almost everything himself. And you might wonder, well, how does this man who's a tailor, know how to do all these things? Well, we have a wonderful institution in this state known as Rutgers University. And anything you wanted to do, you just write a letter to Rutgers and they send you a pamphlet. They send a pamphlet on how to build our septic tanks, pamphlets on how to build the chicken coops, to build the shelters, pamphlets on how to build a fireplace. On anything you wanted to do, Rutgers had a pamphlet for you, as well as sending out one of their agents to help you with that problem. And one time we had a problem with the chickens, which I'll talk about when we get to the chickens. There we are. This was a shelter that was built over here, and actually it was built very close to our neighbor's property, who was Mr. Reuter at that time. And my father wanted to have a bigger run for the chickens. These were the broilers that most of these were broilers, which were going to be sold for meat, and also the females would be the hens, which we would have for eggs. And Mr. Reuter said that he could use part of his property in the back for the run for the chickens, which he did. And then during this time, there was some disease that was happening to the chickens, and they were dying. And the Rutgers agent came up and he said, we have a serum for the chickens, but we're having a hard time finding out how to inoculate them. And my father looked at it and he said, no problem. He got 2 sewing machine needles, attached them to a piece of wood, so there's a little eye in them, put them in the serum, pulled out the chicken's wing and put it right in. He says, now every chicken will be inoculated. And so we caught them early in the morning when it was still cool, and they were a little sleepy, and every single one of them was inoculated for this, and they lived. And so here you can see them in the shelters, because he wanted the chickens to have be out in the open during the summertime and get good and strong. And here is this is the shelters. We built several of these shelters ourselves with wire floors, and when the chickens had to all be driven in at night, because otherwise they roost in the trees, and there are raccoons and all kinds of animals around. And this is one of the chicken coop. This is the egg laying coop. And we had, when it was finally completed after several additions to it, it was 20 feet by 80 feet, and we had lots of eggs, so we never went hungry. I finally decided one day that we should have a sign on the front of our property, because I said, nobody even knows that we have our farm here, except the people who live here, and we had a route where we delivered eggs and poultry, especially during the war when it was so hard to get meat. And so I said, well, I'm going to make that sign. And this is a picture that I saw on the cover of the hatchery where we bought our baby chicks, and so I just made the sign for them.
You knew about modern advertising.
And my mother loved her, here are the trees in the background again, our fruit trees. We had plums and apples and peaches and cherries and pears and all kinds of trees, and she loved her animals. We always had cats, and that was one of her little things. And my father, you would rarely see my father dressed like this. He was going someplace, because on the weekend, he was always on the farm working. After work, he worked, and occasionally my mother could induce him to go into New York with her if there was going to be a wedding or some special occasion. Otherwise, he just did not want to go into New York any more than he had to. And this is when they were going to a wedding. This was a dress that, it's a beautiful little pink dress that my father had made for her, and he made us all dresses because we were going to a wedding. And I think that was at the same time. This is the back part of that front room, and underneath it is where we had the cellar, and there was like a shaft for cold air to come down into it. And this is a picture, another picture of the pool, which was sort of like the center of our social life. And you can see the float that we would jump off of. And this is the flagpole. It was really a lovely place, and it still is. We enjoyed it very much. And it's myself, which I can see a really great picture there. And all in the back were the social members that joined later on. And I think originally we charged them only like $25 a year, and I think the most we ever charged was like from 12 to 25, and I can't believe we ever charged them more than that for the whole summer. And at that, I wanted to say, we always made a profit. There was always a profit. And at the end of the summer, it was a philanthropic organization. Everything was like donated. They had a list of charities, must have been about 20 or 25 names on the list, of the library, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the fire department, the police department, and it was just donated to the UJA. It was donated to any charitable organization. If they asked for the money, it was all donated out. And this is my son, Daniel, and down at the pool. He loved the pool too, and the next picture is an even nicer one, where he really loved the swimming pool. Children just loved it. And this is our new house that we built. When my father was very old, he died when he was 94, and he loved living in Chatham. He said he loved Chatham so much. He said we had always discussed remodeling the old house, and he always said no. And then when he was very old, he said, no, don't remodel the old house, because we had an architect come in, and he said that, in fact, we had two of them, and he said it really didn't pay to do it. And then he said, besides which, we use kerosene stoves in the kitchen, and all that stuff, if it's spilled, it leaks into the wood, and we don't want you building this house. You just tear it down and build another house. And so we did. And we love this house too very, very much. We helped design it, and really enjoy living here so much. There were some little interesting things that I should have told you about, but I don't know how much time I have, but do I have a little bit more time? I know during the war, do you want me to? Yes or no? During the war, my mother sewed for the Red Cross. She made hundreds of layettes and babies and little children's clothing. And really did this because she wanted to help out. And little did we realize that when she died from cancer, and she was in Overlook Hospital and needed transfusion, and we were going to get people to, donate blood, and they said, oh, you don't have to do that. I said, why not? Well, because your mother worked so hard for the Red Cross that they now will donate any blood that she needed. And we never even asked them for that, and they just came forward and said, no. She really worked so hard for us and never said, refused. Whatever we left, I remember these bundles of flannel, cut-out flannel, whatever they left, she would finish within a week, and she was the same as me. So there were other little things that happened, that I want to talk to you about in the springtime. That was always an exciting time and event, because Governor from Mr. Strauss would come with these two huge horses to plow the land. Governor was the only black person I ever knew until I went to school at New York University in New York. He came with those horses and just dug deeply into this rich the birds would come and pick on all the worms that were there, and it was just the smell of the earth coming up and then breaking it and knowing what we could plant. It was really like, spring is here, it's planting time, let's get to it. And that happened every year until, my father got old and couldn't do that anymore, and I guess he wasn't there. Maybe I should just stop now, or if there are any questions you have that you want to know about this one family that came to live here in this community.
Okay, so I'll stop the share now, and we have Blanche Blumenfeld here online with us to answer any questions that you have. Blanche is right up there. There's Blanche and her daughter, and we'll get her to unmute. So Karen, can you unmute your mother? Yeah, there we go. Well, as soon as she talks, I think she'll get to the center of it. So if anybody would either online would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, or anybody here in the audience would like to ask a question, Blanche would be glad to offer.
Absolutely.
Let's see if we have any questions, or Blanche, is there anything you'd like to add to?
Well, I do want to say that growing up here in the Condo, it was like a fairyland. There were so many trees and animals and walking through the woods. And be careful that you don't step up into any kind of sinkhole. And it was just a wonderful way for her to grow up. And I enjoyed being here very much. And we still have a different house on the same property where we grew up. And I love being here. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Hi, this is Pat in California, Blanche. I wanted to know what year was your house built that you live in now?
When was this house built?
Yes.
Oh,
1989.
1990. 1990. This is the second house that was here. The first house was built because my mother wouldn't move here until there was a house with a bathroom. She said, I'm not moving out into the woods. When I was a child growing up in Minsk-Berna, we had somebody always taking care of us. And now I have to be out in the woods? No way. And so that's why my father did build a different house here. And I was born here. I think I was one of the first children born in Overlook Hospital.
What street was it on, Blanche, the house?
The house? It's on Maple Street, just where we always were. My father had 2 acres here, and then he sold one, and we're living on the original acre, and nobody else ever lived here. We could never find any arrowheads or anything to indicate that there were people living here before. So I guess our family is the first one that ever lived on this piece of land.
Great, thank you, Blanche.
You're most welcome.
Anyone else?
When did all the power lines go in?
Blanche, when did the power line?
I just want to thank Blanche for an awesome presentation.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Blanche, when did the power lines go in?
The power lines, oh, they,
The late 1920s.
in the 1920s. Because when I was born, they didn't have the power lines yet. And I remember we had the horses came from Pine Street, and they would come and plow the land for us.
1928,
1928 is when,
the power lines.
yeah, that's when I was born. 1928 is when the power lines came in. And that was made a big difference to everything that was going on here.
They paid $58,000 PSC&G paid
Oh,
$58,000.
PSC&J paid
$58,000.
$58,000 for the right of way for that land. And
Yes.
so the people who own that property, they were the ones who, I guess, received the money for it if they wanted to move, and they could use that money to buy another parcel of land. But this piece of land is, we had actually 2 acres here. And then my father says, well, we really don't need 2 acres. And somebody else wanted to buy 1 acre. But we have the original acre is where we built this house on.
All right, Blanche, we have another question in the room. Hang on.
Could somebody clarify exactly where are the power lines? I know there's a big power line like right on Southern Boulevard. Is that it?
Yes, they're asking about where the power lines are, and they're it goes right
Well,
along.
The power lines are, I'm trying to figure out how many feet they are from our house, because the acres are 100 feet. So there's 1, 2, 3. I guess they were about 300 or 400 feet from our house.
Yeah, they run right along where the
Yes.
police, the fire department is, and the emergency squad and the tennis courts.
Our house is not on Southern Boulevard.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three blocks.
Yes, we have another question here.
Yeah, so I have a question. I don't know if Blanche would know this, or people in the Historical Society might know. Do you know how many of the original homes are still standing?
Actually, Bert, I think. Bert, do you know how many of the original homes are still standing? About 5. Yeah.
Original homes.
Yep. Yeah, Bert's here too, Blanche, and a question.
Oh, Bert's there.
Yeah.
Bert's there.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out how many original homes are still standing, and Bert thought there were probably 5.
He's probably right.
Blanche, why was the pool sold to the town in the 60s? What happened that you turned over that pool property?
Why'd the pool get sold?
The pool got sold because the original colony members decided to just sell, to sell the land, and to
Dissolved.
it just got dissolved. There wasn't any more colony there, and I love the swimming pool. It was a great place to be. And I really moved out of Chatham for a while, and I was living in Millburn. And then we came back and built this house because we liked the property. So we wanted to build a different house here, and that's where we're living now.
So the pool property was sold because the colony was disbanded at that time. There were so few colonists and children of the colonists left in the area that they decided to disband it.
That's true. And they said that the original colony members could use the pool whenever they wanted to. But I never got that golden card, which gave me admission into the pool whenever I wanted to go there. And of course, the people who run it now don't know who I am. So I should have gotten a gold pass,
Yeah, we'll have to introduce them to you.
Well, maybe someday I'll still get it. Who knows?
Anyone else?
I think Karen should move over so everybody
Yeah,
can see her.
Karen, Blanche's daughter is there too, being the prompter.
Yes,
and
Miss
aide.
Karen,
Yeah.
beautiful
Just like
daughter.
her mother did. Come on.
Okay, hold on one second. It's her thing and the society.
She is.
Here's
Hi,
Karen,
everybody.
my beautiful daughter.
And it's nice to see she looks exactly like her mother when her mother was giving that talk. You can see the relationship. Well, thank you very much for being here this afternoon, Blanche. And thank you for everyone who attended. And it's good to see you, Bert, too, another child of the colony here.
And it's Karen's 60th birthday today.
Yes, it is.
Happy birthday. Happy
Oh,
birthday.
yes, happy birthday, Karen. Happy birthday to
You know
you.
what? Thank
Happy
you.
birthday
And you
to
know what's amazing? I read in Bert's
29,
book.
finally.
Yeah, I'm 30 times 2. So Bert's book is such a wealth of information, and I just wanted to share, because Bert already knows this, of course, and many of you probably do, but today on October 16th was the day that the association members came out to the property here, the Estes property. It was like their final look-see before they were making the decision to bid. So they came out today on October 16th in 1921, 101 years ago. And then a year later, on October 19th of 1922, that's why we're in the centennial this year, to celebrate the association. That's when they bought the Estes property, the 145 acres. So today is a very historic day, 101 years from when they all came off the ferry onto the Hoboken train and came here. And there's Bert's book is, Bert, thank you so much for writing this book. I tell you this all the time. In Bert's book, it says, this is a letter dated October 13th, 1921 to the Chatham Colony members. And it said, quote, at a meeting of the Chatham Colony in Mrs. Robbins' home on October 12th, 1921, it was decided that all those wishing to visit the site meet in Hoboken on Sunday, October 16th, 1921 at the Lackawanna Terminal, 15 minutes before train time. Mr. Summer will meet you there. Are you in it? Bring your friends and bring your lunch. Trains leave Hoboken for Chatham at 9:45 in the morning. 65 cents is one way from New York. And the ferry leaves every 15 minutes from Christopher Street. I am truly yours, Mr. B. Summer.
Yes.
Why was Chatham chosen?
It was chosen because Mr. Sommer worked with another bookbinder who knew about the property, and they chose it because it was beautiful. It was in an area near the Great Swamp where they would be able to raise their kids in the country, and it had all the things they wanted.
What else was there? I mean, was it, I mean, how many inhabitants was there?
Oh, the Chatham Township had quite a few inhabitants then. It was a farming community then. So they wanted to do farming too. So it was a perfect place to come. It was undeveloped land at the time. So they had to clear it and make the land ready for their own houses and own
But
farms.
it wasn't all, there were already people here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so how long did it take really actually to come from New York to Chatham at that time?
It was, you came on the train,
But
just what you
yeah,
do
but
now.
how long would the train take at that?
about 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Daniel.
So it's not really that.
yeah, not that different.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, in the back.
Winter is a lot different then?
Were winters,
Were they?
Blanche, were winters a lot different when you were growing up in the colony?
Or winters.
Oh,
Different,
the
different. Like,
winters.
what was winter like with the activities?
Well, actually, I love the winters because then the school was closed because we couldn't, because we couldn't get to the school and the snow was so deep. But I always enjoyed the winters. It was snow, school closed, we could go out. and
Sleigh
the-
riding?
Oh, we could go sleigh riding, and they closed some roads so that we could go sleigh riding on the hills. And I thought that was marvelous, but they don't do that anymore.
And was it colder then? Were the ponds frozen most of the time so you could go skating?
Wait, on Kelly's Pond, did you and Bert and your friends go skating?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, we drove down Pine Street to see where that pool was, and I was so surprised. It was a tiny little pool, like it was smaller than the colony pool. So I guess what happened was that this is the way the world goes. I guess it was a huge place to go skating and we all enjoyed it. And now it's just a tiny little mud hole.
So it sounds like, yes, winters were different.
Well,
You used to get your ice cream too, right?
oh, yes. Then when we went down the
The
street,
summertime.
we could get ice cream. It was, the land there was a little higher. And then you could just drive right down Main Street, or we would walk. And then they had this, this thing that was built into that property.
You mean
where
the one where the high
school is
where the high
now.
school is?
And it was like ice. It was so cold in there that you could buy ice cream. And it just shows you how, well, see, I'm pretty old now, but how the land has actually changed in that time that I'm living, because things that were huge pools and places to go skating was just now a little tiny pond. And then we would go down Maple Street, and then we could buy ice cream there because there was a farm with horses. And then this was a huge place where it was cold underneath. I mean, I have actually seen changes taking place in this area where we live now.
You mean like environmentally?
Environmentally, how things have actually changed. Oh, well, I'm 94 years old, so I guess it's about 100 years almost. And so that was interesting for me to go to places that I had seen before that were huge lakes, and we skated on them, and now it was just a tiny little pond. So I guess I've been living through history.
Any other questions? From
Great
the
job with
audience?
the history, Blanche. Very much enjoyed it. And did you raise chickens on the property too, I understand?
Oh, yes, definitely. We had chickens here. We had a huge chicken house. It was long. I think there were 4 separate rooms, and they were each pretty big. And then we had a summer place where they could go out in the summer and be in shelters. And then we didn't really want the roosters, so those were sold to a place in Madison. In fact, I met somebody in a doctor's office one day, and he said he remembers that his mother used to buy the live chickens in Madison there, where we sold the roosters because we didn't want them all.
And you had to go collect the hens, right? At the end
Oh,
of the
yes, we
day?
wanted the hens. We didn't want the roosters.
When they were outside though, weren't they outside? You
Yeah,
had
well,
to
they
go
were
when it was
outside all
light.
summer, and then we vaccinated them too. Because we used to get these bulletins from Rutgers University all the time. And they said that there was some kind of a disease coming around to the chickens or whatever. And they said, can we come to your house and vaccinate the chickens? But we don't have any way of doing that. And my father says, I'll get you a way to do it. And he took 2 needles from sewing machines and he put them on the side of a piece of wood, and he made an injection needle for them. And when the guy from, I guess somebody from Rutgers University came up, he said, you said you have a way of injecting the chickens. And he says, yes, I'll show you what I did. And he said, well, that's a marvelous invention. Do you mind if we take it back with us? He says, you can have it for all the chickens you want, but this is the one I'm keeping for me. I'll give you this one. You can take it with you and give it to all the other farmers. And whatever the problem was, they solved it with his chicken needle, with his needles, because he was a tailor.
No, it's an honor to meet one of
To him,
the,
it was nothing. You know,
yeah,
it
original.
wasn't as if he had made a big invention or anything. He said, I just needed something, so I made it.
He's a
Blanche, did
genius.
you ever visit the tea house?
Did you go to the Samovar Tea House?
I don't remember if I ever went to it, but I knew them very well, and I knew the husband played in the New York Philharmonic Orchestra.
Did your mom go?
I don't think we ever went to New York.
No, to the Samovar House, right over
Oh,
here.
the Samovar House. I don't know if we ever went there. I think we may have gone. My mother may have gone, but it was an interesting experience for them. For us, a lot of things happened here.
Good, thank you. Anyone else?
Well, just that it's an honor to be connected with one of the original pioneers settling Chatham and giving us the history to make it what it is. And very pleased to hear the genius from your father pass to you and to Karen and your pro-vaxxers and helping us keep safe from disease with the early vaccination.
Early pro-vaxxers.
Great.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story of what happened once. I used to take the train into New York University because I went to college there. And then we would take the ferry boat across the river and land in the New York side. And then from there, you can take the bus or walk to NYU. And one day there were like icebergs in the river. And so the ferry boat came late to school. So I had to be on this ferry boat, and there were like big icebergs in the river. And so finally I got to school, and the professor said to me, "You know, you're late." I says, "Really? Why are you late?" I says, "Well, there were icebergs in the river, and there was a big fog, and the ferry boat got lost." So he said to me, "Now I have had every kind of story possible, but that it takes the cake. That is not possible that happened today."
Did you tell him you were commuting from a chicken farm?
I didn't say anything. I just took my seat and that was it. But I thought that was strange that he wouldn't know this. That there's a ferry boat that takes you from Hoboken into New York, and there are icebergs on it. I just let it go.
That's a good story.
Well, you know, I am coming from a farm country, and I do come on the train, and there are icebergs in the river, so that was that. I just let it go.
Good. Right, anyone else? Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you all here, and it was certainly a pleasure to have Blanche and Karen online with us. So
I want to thank you for the opportunity that we have to talk about these olden days. And it was interesting growing up here.
it's great to have you share it with us. Thank you, everyone, very much.
So thank you for having us.
And all. And happy birthday, Karen.
Yeah, happy birthday,
Karen.
Karen.
Yes, it's her birthday.
It was the best way to spend a birthday, is to honor my mom. What can I say?
Great, you're getting a lot of thank yous and happy birthdays on the town here. Okay,
It was our pleasure to help you with this, and we enjoyed just as much as I hope other people have enjoyed listening to
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for all you do.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Keep young.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a wonderful
Great seeing you.
day.